Welcome to episode 1 of ChicagoMusicHistory.com's YouTube channel. What I'm going to be doing here is making various videos about Chicago, music, and history, and how they all tie together. Basically, Chicago changed the musical world as we know it. So a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Chicago, and my whole life just been really interested in the history of music in general, the musical instruments, and everything in between. And I've found a lot of interesting things over the years that I think a lot of people don't know and are worth sharing with the world. So this first episode is going to be a little bit less about music and a little bit more about the origins of Chicago, which some of you may be unfamiliar with. So Chicago, Illinois is located on the southern tip of Lake Michigan in the upper Midwest part of the United States, and currently home to about 9.5 million people in the metropolitan area. So what was the origin of all the success of the city? And there's a few things. In the late 1840s, we had two major events happen in Chicago. The first one was the completion of the Michigan and Illinois Canal, which was dug. It connected the Great Lakes to the Mississippi River, and this resulted in the East Coast water traffic being able to make its way through the Great Lakes and connect all the way to the Gulf of Mexico, along with every city in between. And the second major event that happened in the 1840s was the railroad system starting to boom in America. And it just so happened, with all that water traffic, all the railroads started to hit Chicago also. And by the 1900s, Chicago had more rail lines coming in and out of more directions of the city than any other city in the country. A major hub. So you have water traffic and you have rail traffic, and that is going to be the beginning of a booming economy. You also have, in the 1800s, that influx of immigrants coming from Europe looking to start a new life. And after 1865, Chicago and the more tolerant northern half of the United States became an appetizing destination for the freed slaves and servants of the South that were looking to start a new life with better opportunity. So when you combine all those things, Chicago is becoming a melting pot, and there's one thing that can unite people who don't speak the same language, and that is music. So fast forward to 1892, 1893, we have another two events that are noteworthy in the history of Chicago. First one is the Columbian Exposition, or the World's Fair, in 1893, which has nothing to do with the country of Colombia, but it has to do with the 400-year anniversary of Christopher Columbus discovering America. So that World's Fair was hugely successful, had millions of visitors, and a very progressive fair, and it had music from all over the world. It had Joseph Douglas, an African-American classical violinist. It had Ciceretta Jones, who was known as the Black Patty, a soprano opera singer, pianist Scott Joplin, the military band conducted by John Philip Sousa, the Stoughton Musical Society, which was the oldest choral society in the U.S. It was the first appearance of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir outside of Utah. It featured Indonesian music. It had hula dancers and Hawaiian music, the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and it had Amy Beach, she was commissioned by the Board of Lady Managers to compose choral work for the Woman's Building in the World's Fair. And of course, this diverse selection of music was spread all over the world as the millions of visitors returned home. So that was a great start to musical history in Chicago. And the second event that happened around 1892 and 1893 was the arrival of John Sears and the Sears catalog, which instantly gave citizens around the country access to a plethora of objects that were not readily accessible before. And of course, that Sears catalog featured musical instruments, and that is a big part of Chicago history also. So that's where I'm going to leave episode 1, setting up many things to come in the music scene over the next 130 years.